The psychology of supremacy, envy, conditioning, and the mythic power of Black resilience. White supremacy is not merely a political ideology. It is a psychological wound, a spiritual distortion, and a mythic inversion. Beneath its brutal tactics and systemic reach lies a deeper inadequacy, a fractured identity that seeks validation through domination. When we examine the historical and ongoing attempts to strip Black individuals of their rights, dignity, and humanity, we do not see strength, we see fear. We see envy. We see a desperate attempt to suppress what cannot be replicated, a lineage of strength, creativity, and spiritual rootedness that stretches back to ancient lands and sacred traditions. Skin-deep envy, the unspoken obsession. The beauty of Black skin, its richness, its radiance, its ancestral depth, has long been a source of both fascination and fear for white supremacists. This envy is rarely named, yet it permeates the cultural obsession with control. The desire to belittle, erase, and appropriate Black identity stems from a psychological hunger to dominate what is perceived as powerful, mysterious, and unyielding. Black history is not a chronicle of victimhood. It is a legacy of survival, adaptation, and transcendence. From the Middle Passage to the Civil Rights Movement, from Tulsa to Ferguson, Black communities have endured systemic violence while continuing to create, resist, and rise. This resilience is not just admirable, it is mythic. And it terrifies those whose identities are built on fragile hierarchies. Like a wild horse that must be broken, the language of dehumanization. Historically, white supremacists have used dehumanizing metaphors to justify control. One of the most insidious is the comparison of Black individuals to wild horses that must be broken. This phrase, echoed in plantation records, colonial writings, and modern hate speech, reveals the supremacist desire not to coexist but to conquer. It frames autonomy as defiance and strength as threat. This language is not accidental, it is ritualized. It seeks to reduce Black humanity to something untamed, something that must be subdued to prove white dominance. But this desire to dominate is not power, it is pathology. It reveals a fractured psyche that cannot tolerate difference, cannot honor beauty outside its own reflection, and cannot accept that humanity is not a hierarchy but a mosaic. Mass conditioning, the manufactured mind of supremacy. Racism is not born, it is built. Mass conditioning is the mechanism by which supremacist ideologies are replicated across generations. Through media, education, religion, and law, individuals are taught to associate whiteness with virtue and Blackness with danger, inferiority, or wildness. These associations are not facts, they are fictions, reinforced through repetition until they become internalized truths. This conditioning is dangerous because it creates a collective delusion. It allows ordinary people to participate in extraordinary harm without questioning their role. It numbs empathy, distorts perception, and replaces curiosity with fear. Worse, it creates a feedback loop. The more individuals act on these conditioned beliefs, the more the system rewards them with a false sense of belonging and superiority. Mass conditioning is not just a social problem, it is a spiritual crisis. It severs individuals from their own humanity by teaching them to dehumanize others. And unless interrupted, it perpetuates cycles of violence, shame, and denial. Systemic racism, religion, politics, and the myth of divine whiteness. Systemic racism is not random, it is ritualized. It is embedded in the architecture of Western civilization, often disguised as divine order, moral law, or political necessity. Its roots stretch deep into religious doctrine, colonial theology, and anthropocentric mythologies that elevate whiteness to godlike status. In many Western traditions, whiteness has been symbolically aligned with purity, light, and divinity. From Renaissance paintings to missionary propaganda, white bodies were cast as angels, saviors, and chosen vessels of divine will. Meanwhile, Blackness was demonized, associated with sin, savagery, and spiritual corruption. These symbolic codes were not benign, they were weaponized. They justified slavery, segregation, and genocide under the guise of salvation. Anthropocentric racism, the belief that certain humans are closer to God, nature, or truth, reinforces this hierarchy. It places white individuals at the top of a spiritual pyramid, casting them as moral arbiters, political leaders, and cultural gatekeepers. Even today, white politicians and lawmakers are often treated as untouchable, as if their power is ordained rather than elected. But whiteness is not divinity. Congress is not Olympus. And no human, regardless of skin tone or title, is a god. This myth of divine whiteness is dangerous because it sanctifies oppression. It allows systemic racism to masquerade as order, tradition, or patriotism. It teaches society to trust white authority without question, while doubting black autonomy at every turn. It is not just a lie, it is a ritual of erasure. Education as liberation, rewiring the conditioned mind. What is conditioned can be unconditioned. Through education, experience, and radical empathy, individuals can confront their biases and dismantle the internal architecture of supremacy. This process is not comfortable, but it is necessary. It requires truth-telling, accountability, and the willingness to be transformed. This transformation does not require tragedy. It requires courage. It requires the humility to face history not as a weapon, but as a mirror. And it requires honoring Black voices not as exceptions, but as essential guides to a more humane future. Education must go beyond facts, it must become ritual. It must teach not only what happened, but why it happened, how it was justified, and how it can be undone. It must expose the mythologies of supremacy and replace them with frameworks of discernment, autonomy, and spiritual resilience. Toward a new mythology, humanity over race. We must move beyond the illusion of racial superiority and toward a new mythology, one that centers humanity, autonomy, and spiritual resilience. Black history offers us this mythology. It is not a story of defeat, it is a story of defiance. It is not a wound, it is a wellspring. And it belongs not just to Black communities, but to all who seek to become better humans, not better races. This new mythology must honor survivor wisdom. It must protect truth-tellers. It must dismantle the altars of supremacy and build sanctuaries of justice. It must teach that no race is divine, no skin is sacred, and no title is beyond accountability. It must remind us that humanity is not a hierarchy, it is a covenant.